All right, good evening, everyone. Good evening. Welcome to the March 13th, 2024 meeting of the Affordable Housing Trust Fund Board for the City of Revere. Good to be back at our normal date and time with our new members and long-running members. So my name is Joe Gravelisi. I'm the chair of the Affordable Housing Trust Fund Board, and we've got, I believe, perfect attendance today. So I'm going to take a call of the roll. Layla Petri.
Present.
And Lori Manza.
Here.
And Deb Frank.
Present.
Anayo Ismargi.
Here, present.
Claire Anzurillo. Here. Dean Harris.
Here.
And Matt Wolford.
Here.
All right, we are 8 for 8, so that's exciting. So we'll move right into it. So we had a few late additions to the agenda, which you all should have received via email. And then adding on to that, I anticipate that at 6:40, Roy is going to join us via Zoom to talk about 133 Salem Street and talk through some of our options there. So to start with, we're going to do ratification to the previous meeting's minutes. I hope you all had a chance to review. We sent those minutes out. Does anyone have any objections or questions with regard to the previous meeting? Okay, I'm going to assume unanimous consent. Okay, so ordered. Third item on the agenda is the finances update. So we'll go to Anayo for that.
Sure. Good evening, everyone. This is a message, the most recent report from Susan Newton, March 6th. This was last week. She's a budget director, City of Revere Auditor's Office. Now, this is actually an interesting, a new occurrence that happened with our budget, and I'll explain in detail now. This is a message from Asutan Santa. She said the city has certified its free cash for this year, and the City Council approved the mandatory free cash transfers, one of which was for the Affordable Housing Trust Fund in the amount of $366,597.
Can you repeat that amount? I'm sorry.
Certainly, that's $366,597, $366,597. That brings the new balance to $1,142,942.26. I will make this available on a public website so that we all have this exact number. But that is a significant increase in our funds. So that's $1,142,942.26.
Terrific. Thank you for that update, and thank you as well to the mayor, to the city council, Tom and your team for the continued advocacy for support for funds through the Affordable Housing Trust as we continue to grow that pool. That'll help us continue to accomplish the goals that we've set out. So thank you for that. Next piece, and I think we'll do this very quickly because I do see that we have Roy in the waiting room, so we can move right to the Salem Street piece. We did just have a meeting of the Housing Production Plan Working Group. And the next steps on that is we have so we got back survey results from the Housing Production Plan, which I'll send around to everyone if you haven't seen them. Are those publicly available yet, or?
They are now.
Oh, no, so never mind.
So there's
Yeah.
a form or going to be changing the way we kind of show the data.
Got it. So we're working through making that as a publicly available document with some of the survey results. I think broad takeaways are things that would not come as a surprise to anybody, though, right? I think that's fair to say. The number one cited concern that people have when they talk about reasons why they'd move out of the community is housing affordability. There's a concern about, appropriate types of housing options being available, particularly for folks that may need to downsize or may be looking for accessible units or supportive units if they have particular disabilities or needs, and affordability both in the ownership and rental space, right? None of these findings would be particularly surprising, but then some of the details, will come through. We're gonna have another working group meeting in a month and then a public forum in May, which is the actual date for that set. The date's not set, but in May, we're gonna do a virtual public forum. So that's going to supplement the in-person public forum that we did previously. So hopefully doing one virtual and one in-person allows us to reach as broad and diverse an audience as possible to get folks' feedback. And those elements in the survey will be used to help craft the housing production plan. We can go into more details on the HPP maybe afterwards. I think because we have Roy and Michael kind enough to join us tonight. I see that they're here on Zoom, so thank you. I think it makes sense to go into talking about Salem Street. So really quickly, before I more formally welcome our guests, and then maybe Tom, if you want to be ready to participate in this conversation, we want to have you on microphone if we have questions. So we've already been involved in this project for our new members. I think you already know this, and for the public, where some support from the Affordable Housing Trust unlocked a Commonwealth Builder Grant, which allowed 16 of the units already existing in this property to be deed restricted affordable. And there's a lottery coming up in, is it April 1st? Anyone that knows can fact check me on that one.
Yeah, so I think
Yeah.
that was the original date. I think they're going through and revising that now.
Got it.
And there's 18 total.
18,
affordable.
right, not 16. So 18 units, and the lottery will take place for those units. And then there's market rate units as well that are on sale, some of which have been sold, but then a number of which have not been sold yet, which those listings have been sent around. So the work of the Affordable Housing Trust is already, added to the subsidized housing inventory with the units that are coming online there, which is great. But we've explored, as a way of growing the subsidized housing inventory, doing what we can to add to the number of affordable units that come out of this property. And so some of the options that we've discussed include sort of subsidizing the difference between the market rate cost and the subsidized cost, the deed restricted cost, to add more units to their lottery, or perhaps buying the units, the market units, 1, 2, 3, and then reselling them at a deed restricted price. So we have Roy and Michael to kind of talk through the units that are available, what the options are, what the lottery process looks like. And then from there, and this is less of a Roy and Michael question, but I think it'd be helpful to have them. It would be kind of on us to talk through, there's different size units available, there's studios, there's 1 bedrooms, there's 2 bedrooms. And then also it would be up to us to talk about what we would want deed restrictions to look like. So a lot of things to cover here, but with that, I wanted to thank Roy and Michael for joining us. If you just want to introduce yourselves and maybe just give an overview of the conversations we've had so far and where things are for the lottery and then also for the market units.
Well, I'll start off. I want to thank the board for the opportunity to discuss this opportunity. And a little bit of background. Yes, I'm the listing agent for this, and I'm associate broker with Metropolitan Boston Real Estate, the company that was hired to list the market rate units, and with that also handle the sale or lottery process for the affordables. With me is Michael Albano, who is the broker on record and the owner of Metropolitan Boston Real Estate. And we want to applaud the efforts here of the Revere Affordable Housing Trust on board because in our background, our own personal background, both as a former city councilor and as a planning board member in Michael's case, we've always been huge advocates of creating affordable home ownership opportunities, and which the board has supported. The idea is, as Joe has mentioned, that we currently have 18 affordable condos or deeded, soon to be deeded condos to be part of a lottery process. Originally, we had 7 that was approved by the city and that we were going to run. But with the application of the Commonwealth Builders Program, which the developer, Broadway Capital, proceeded with, increased that number up to 18, as the board is aware. Because of some questions regarding some inclusions and also the process that was originally had by us back in November and December of last year, CHAPA and Mass Housing had some questions and have asked us to reopen the whole process of the affordable lottery condo process. And in doing so, push back the dates. Now, you mentioned April 1st. That's hopefully the date that we will reopen the lottery. And basically, in the whole thing, the only thing that will change is that we will have one more site available that was not in the original, which was My Mass Homes. That is a database that is used by entities such as neighborhood developers, NOAA, Boston Housing Authority, to place affordable housing opportunities And it was the one database that we did not. Apparently, the one that we had used was no longer in use, or the designated, so to say, the certified database. So just to make sure that we did not miss an opportunity for some individuals who may be interested in this, we're doing it again. The idea, as I've spoken to Joe offline, that the Revere Housing Trust Fund, Affordable Housing Trust Fund, purchase 2 market rate units and then deed them as affordable and use them or add them to the mix, making it a total of 20. We would applaud it. We would be in favor of it as civically minded individuals. I say that. The question just lies in, and I can talk to Michael Albano and also Chapa and Mass Housing, is how we would introduce those two. The 2 ideas that I discussed is, one, if the board acts quickly enough, we can make them part of the original lottery or the lottery that we're having right now and include them as part of the 20. Or we can still act as the listing agent for the Affordable Housing Trust Fund and simply list them and use the list of the leftover participants who did not get selected in the original 18. I want to just let the board members know and the audience know that as of right now, going through the original application process of those 18 units back in November, December, we had online entries are in the numbers of 400. Now, once we did away with incomplete applications or individuals who did not qualify, that got down to 232, and of them, the 232, how many individuals were able to get a loan and actually go through the process? Because you can apply, but if you can't get a loan, then it's all for naught, and that's one of the things we want to streamline. That ended up being 132. So now we have 132 qualified individuals who will be entered into the lottery for 18 units. Chances are, it's a great number to have, because again, having someone selected and actually follow through sometimes doesn't always happen. I can say that I'm very confident in the screening process that we've done, that we're not going to go through 132 names and not find 18 buyers. It is to say, more than likely, we'll probably get through the list, and within the first 50 units, 50 first names, we'll probably get rid of these 18, and if need be, up to 20 with the additional 2. So either you can join the process and we'll figure that out with Tom, the Mass Housing, and Chapa, or we can just use the list from what those individuals who did not get selected and go back. I say this, that I recently had an individual who put a deposit in one of our market rate units and pulled out because he got a call, just happened just within the last week, from the Medford Housing Authority, because he got selected for a lottery to buy an affordable unit that he applied for 2 years ago. It took them 2 years to get through the process because of phases and whatnot. So we will keep the list, and that list can be handed over to the city at any point, and it can still be used. So you never know when you apply. That's just an example of how long it takes to get through all the names and the process. I'm crossing my fingers. We hope not to take 2 years to get rid of 18 units. I think the developer would be very disappointed in our efforts if we do that. But that just goes to show you that once you have a vetted list, it is definitely something that can be held on to for any future projects and so forth. I'll let Michael Albano speak as the broker on record, if he has anything to add before we cede and answer any questions.
Thank you. Before you do, I just want to quickly, I think we'll talk through a lot of things, but I think one thing where Roy and I are certainly in alignment, and I think the whole board likely is as well. We've talked through a lot of different strategies and opportunities and possibilities for how to add subsidized, deed-restricted home ownership opportunities, and there's pros and cons to all of them when you look at location, unit type, et cetera. Obviously, the pro of there's a vetted, trusted lottery being done, to find qualified and potential, applicants, potential buyers is something that is really valuable, right? It's something that we know we want to make sure that would be done right as part of a process. So that certainly provides us an opportunity. So Michael, certainly take it from here.
Yeah, so, can you guys hear me?
We can hear you. You're a little choppy, so
Yeah.
maybe if that continues, maybe turn your video off, see if that helps. Not that we don't enjoy seeing your
Yeah, I apologize. I apologize. I got meatballs and sauce on the stove.
Nice. Why didn't you bring them here to City Hall?
I just want. Oh, come on, you guys got plenty of meatballs and sauce over there.
This is true.
Anyway, I'll just say quickly, that we're pretty pleased to be working on this project, and we want to cooperate in every way possible with the Affordable Housing Trust Fund. As Roy points out, both of us have a very long sort of legacy interest in affordable housing, and we both worked in this world on numerous projects, and in the course of both of our lives in politics. I just want to try to be of much help as I possibly can. I will say, quite honestly, we're not thrilled about having to reopen the application process. Mass Housing and CHAPA are kind of making us do that. We think we did a pretty good job the first time. But obviously, in consideration of, what this project and certainly the affordable side of this project is all about, we want to, try to bend over backwards and be as cooperative and as helpful to Mass Housing and to CHAPA and to the city of Revere as we possibly can on behalf of the developer that has hired us to execute on this project. So, I just want to put out there that, if anybody in the city of Revere, anybody involved in the Affordable Housing Trust Fund or in affordable housing in the city of Revere needs anything from either Roy or myself, please feel free to reach out to us. And I think that's the reason we came here tonight to attend this meeting, is to hear what you guys want to do about these two units and be able to bring that back to our developer and make a decision.
Sure.
So thank you.
Well, thank you, and we'd like to, we've had a chance to chat, so I want to make sure that others have a chance to ask questions. I do think an important thing just to get some clarification on is what maybe the practical difference would be and what maybe the needed timeline would be on the difference between sort of subsidizing that gap and adding to the current lottery versus getting the vetted lottery list and doing a resale. And I see that, Roy, you're raising your hand, so I'll let you jump in there. Mm-hmm.
And I think Tom, who's in the audience, may be able to speak to this. One of the things that was spoken about and, is of concern to Mass Housing and CHAPA was how we're doing these pulls and the preferences. And as you were talking, and as I was talking, reacting to this, strategically thinking, one has to find out if we conclude these two as into the original lottery, the 20. We can only reserve 70% of the units for the first pool of local preferences.
Mm-hmm.
And then after that, it goes to general.
Okay. Whereas if
I
we...
think-
Go ahead. Yep.
Yeah, as a strategy, I have to wonder, if we start from scratch and not include these in the original lottery, say, and we just put it out there and we do a separate pool, process. I wonder if strategically it doesn't help out to ensure that these are going to go to Revere residents.
Yeah, so Tom.
And this is something that we'd
Yeah.
have to talk about.
So Tom, I don't know if you have any insight into this. If this is separate from from the existing lottery process and it's something that we purchase and we're putting the deed restrictions, would we have the authority to put in as part of that the lottery is for people that are, Revere residents, it's with the Revere resident preference? Or is that kind of TBD?
I'm not a lawyer, but I guess I play one at the Affordable Housing Trust Fund meetings. I think that the local preference is set at 70%, but I don't know what is 70% of 2, right?
Yeah.
So I don't know what would be the case there. I think it would be cleaner and easier to adopt it as part of this lottery. And then you've got a round number of 20,
This is true, yeah.
assuming you go 2, and it's just a little more easy to solve for that. But I'll defer to a real attorney for the official answer there.
Got it. And so the 70% means basically making sure that I understand this right. So there's essentially 2 pulls, right? The first pull is from people that meet the local preference, which would mean that they're existing Revere residents. Is that right?
Existing Revere residents, somebody who works in Revere, a City of Revere employee, Revere Public Schools employee, somebody who has school children in Revere but might not live in Revere due to busing or what have
Yep.
you. That's generally the criteria that will draw 70% from that pool. And then we also have, as a result of a city council request, to have 3 veterans included in that 70%. So we'll have to kind of figure out how that all plays into it as well.
Got it. So
But that'll
basically,
all be
it is
part
a
of that 70%
guarantee
bucket.
that among that 70%, 3 of those units are veterans, and it's veterans that meet that criteria of being a Revere resident or employee or kid in the school or whatever.
I think we'd like to start at the point of veterans that meet that criteria, but there would actually be 3 pools. So one would be the local preference fits all the criteria I had noted. Then the second pool would be veterans if we don't hit that threshold of 3. And then the third would be just anyone who applied that's eligible.
Got it. And all the people, and then in a situation in theory where you had, it's probably not in theory, it's almost certainly reality, more than 17 Revere local preference people, from that 70% pool that don't get picked, they would still go back into that pool for the other 30, so they would have another chance, but it would also be open to anyone that meets the income guidelines who's a Mass resident. Is that right?
Correct. So everybody would be in that last pool if you didn't get selected. And in case there are city councilors listening and wondering, we also requested 3 seniors be part of that pool. And this will get sent to them in like an advisory, but also so you all know as you're setting criteria maybe in future projects, if we ever request senior preference criteria, we are not allowed to do that because we're not allowed to discriminate on the basis of age. The only time you can require housing be set aside for seniors is in a majority senior development like ones we'd see at the Revere Housing Authority, any federal or state subsidized predominantly senior housing development, which this is not. So if it's not that type of development, you can't require that a certain amount be set aside for seniors because that's age discrimination per the Fair Housing law.
And to add to that, because I know this comes up as a question, and you also can't require, set aside for like families with kids for the same reason, right? You can't discriminate for or against families with kids. Everyone has to be treated equally for that purpose. Is that right?
I think that might be, I think you are. So actually, any larger project that has state funding for like affordable housing, actually you have to have a requirement that 10% is set aside for certain numbers of bedroom sizes.
Bedroom
not
sizes,
families per
yes,
se.
but not,
Exactly,
yeah.
for or against.
So it would be, and again, I know you're not a lawyer, and Claire works in the legal office, so maybe she could offer some correction here, but my understanding is it would be perfectly valid and perfectly reasonable and appropriate and legal for us to, when we think about either this project or similar ones, what we would want a larger unit or 2 bedrooms because we want to incentivize or support more family-sized development, but we're not allowed to put a restriction on it that says, this unit is preferred for a family with children under 18 that are in the schools or something like that. We can do the first one, but we can't do the second. Is that your non-lawyer understanding?
I'm gonna steer clear of that one.
Okay, thank
I'm
you.
not sure.
Pleading the fifth. I believe that to be the case. So hopefully that's all helpful context and background. So for all the reasons that Tom mentioned, I do think it would be cleaner, if possible, to try to put everything as part of one lottery. I do want to open up to two things. First of all, I want to get people's thoughts, because, you know, we've been talking a lot. I want to make sure everyone gets their chance to ask questions that they have. And also, if directionally this is something that the board kind of agrees with is a good idea. So feel free if anyone wants, we can go across the board, or if people want to just jump in if they have questions or comments. All right.
So I understand, and all right, I'll make it clear. I like the idea of adding 2 units. I like the idea of putting it as part of this lottery. I do feel badly for the people that are on there currently. You know, now that they started out at 400, now it's down to 120. You know, you have a 17% chance of getting a unit, and presumably that percentage is going to go down. So I do feel for those people that are waiting, and understand that it's not the developer that's causing this, but I think it was Chapter and some other entities. My question is, so we vote to deed restrict 2 units as affordable, but now you got to recalculate the condo fees. If you sold units already, would that cause like a big stink with the people that have bought and purchased? And there's a fee schedule based on the condo fees, and all of a sudden you're taking income out of that, and then that cost is going to be shared by the market rate ones. How are you guys going to do that?
You're correct. There will be some sort of structure set. There's already going to be some subsidy by the market rate condo owners into the existing 18 units. But when you spread it out over 27, so you have 51 units, 52 if you include the commercial unit, but 51 residential units, splitting the difference of the difference of what the affordable is going to make. It doesn't really add to that much. We're talking a couple of dollars, so I don't think that it would make so much of a difference on an individual market rate unit that there'd be some sort of ill will or stress on the market rates. You know, typically, this is what ends up when you pass something like the Community Preservation Act. When you go around to it, I mean, you're talking about a property owner paying another $30 on top of his existing total yearly tax bill. And, you know, $25 more a year that I'm gonna pay in order to create green space, have historic preservation and affordable housing. Yeah, you know, that's why it usually gets passed. But we'll work those numbers out, or rather the developer and his attorney will work those numbers out. But I don't think it's gonna move the needle much right now, an additional 2. Because you're probably reducing whether, you know, and again, it all depends on what the size of the condo you're buying. If I pull up my notes right now, let's see here, I have the cheat sheet, so to speak.
So I've got 2. I've got the one that you sent, which was the grid of the restricted units currently, and then also the market rate ones that are available.
Right, but I was looking at the condo fees themselves. A condo fee for, let's say, a studio is running right now a market rate around the $250. And when you bring it down to affordable, I think that they're targeting it to be $175. So that $50 difference is now going to be subsidized by the other units, as I stated. So you divide $50 by 50 units, and it's an extra $1 that the market rate unit would pay. So I don't think that's going to make that much of a difference when it comes to the subsidy overall.
Good question. Thank
And that's the nice thing about these larger projects. If you have, if this was a smaller development,
And then the cross subsidy becomes a lot bigger that you need. Right?
yeah, so that becomes a bigger, that's the beauty of what they say, scale of economies. Once you have a larger project, and you're subsidizing a small, such a small group, it's not really felt as much by the other owners.
So again, I feel for what you guys have to go through, what the people on the waiting list are going through, but I'm all for the housing authority, the Affordable Housing Trust, investing in two additional affordable housing units. It's desperately needed. That working class dynamic is definitely needed in the city, and I'm all for it.
Other questions, comments?
I've got one that's more kind of process-wise. You mentioned two distinctions. One, once we agree to purchase the properties, they would either be in a pool of 20 or added to a list for leftover participants. What's the material difference between those two options?
Well, I guess there's a couple sides of it. I'll answer from our side, and then they can answer from their side. From our side, the material difference could be in the sort of how much we outlay and when we would expect income from it, which is that, if we're doing a separate process, I think we would outlay the full cost of each unit, and then we would receive the income for it essentially from whoever wins that, whoever are the leftover lottery participants that are eligible that then elect to purchase those two units. And then cash that we would get back would be based on, their mortgage and, the terms and things like that. So that's one material difference for us, is sort of the schedule of money out, money in. And then a process difference is just timing on, we would have to determine, when we would do that, how we would do the outreach, things like that. Am I missing any major process differences, do you think, from the city side, Tom? Yeah, and we would have to get an official kind of legal opinion on, okay, we have two units, 70% of the pool is supposed to be the local preference pool. Do you round up, and is it 2 out of 2, or do you have to round down? I have no idea what the answer to that question would be, so we'd have to get an answer to that before we would know for sure how to proceed. Others? And I'll kick it to Mike and Roy for any material kind of differences on their end.
Well, if we were to include it as part of the, 18, materially, it is a big difference. And I think Mike will agree. How fast can you go out and set aside the money, designate which two you want, and then you're gonna have to close on it? I think it would be kind of scary on our part, and for the developer to wait we may have to wait for you guys to close before we can actually include it in the lottery. And Michael can, chime in on this. I'm trying to think out loud the whole process.
Yeah.
Because, we as of right now, we're in the midst of editing our original affordable housing plan. And we're just doing it for the 18. To go back and add 2 units that are being purchased separately. Again, I don't know,
Sure.
what CHAPA and what Mass Housing are going to say, versus you have more control, because in the process, you have a lot of chefs in the kitchen right now, so to speak. If you buy it and don't include it and just say, we're gonna just use your list, that's a lot easier to do, because you don't have Mass Housing and CHAPA overlooking your shoulder and dictating to us what we have to do.
Sure.
I think it's almost a better process, but, Mike, what are your thoughts? I think, isn't that true that if we include it right now with TriDo, there's a lot of, tricky steps that we may have to follow versus just saying, look, work off our list when this is said and done, and you guys decide what that process is gonna look like.
Sure, I see,
In a
I see
month
the
or two.
value in that. I think one thing before Mike jumps in, I do want to just, in terms of like this, the process from our end, we have the ability to move quickly, although that doesn't mean that we would move hastily, right? We'd want to make sure that we'd have a proper deliberation and talk through. But at the same time, if and when we have alignment as a board, we'd be able to vote, you know, even if it wasn't today, if it was, you know, we could schedule an emergent, like a special session for a vote after we've had a chance to talk through terms. So like, if there's time pressure on your end where it's like, okay, if you wanted to include things in the lottery, it would have to be done by X, Y, and Z a date, and we'd have to make all our decisions by then. As long as that isn't like, you know, right now, I think we'd probably be able to do that and move pretty quickly. So that part's not a concern. I think the mass housing CHAPA piece, you know, obviously we'd want to find out the answer to that. But appreciate the feedback and helpfulness there. And Mike, apologies for interrupting. I just
No,
wanted to
not
make
at
sure.
all.
Yep.
Not at all. This isn't something we have to decide right now. Right? I mean, I think if you guys are serious and your process requires some amount of time, we're not under any time constraints in terms of whether we can commit to this, but the fact of the matter is units are not going to be ready to be occupied for, you know, at least some number of months right now. And so there couldn't actually be, as far as I know, there can't actually be a closing.
Yeah.
So you can't actually legally own these two apartments until closings can actually occur. That's one consideration. And that may dictate, you know, the idea that these get set aside and that that the city of Revere gets to ultimately determine who the buyers will be.
Sure.
But I also like the idea of including it with the 18, and we have other reasons, our developer, and I think Roy and I have other reasons why we would want this to be part of the other 18. So I don't want to sound evasive, but
Yeah,
I think
no,
that's
that's helpful. I think there's no immediate right answer, right? Which is why I
Right.
think we just have to, I think one thing that might be helpful, I do want to I want everyone to have a chance to ask all the questions that they have. I get the sense, but I just want to see if I'm wrong. Does anyone have any like wholesale major red flag objection to just the concept of doing this at all? No? Okay, just making sure, because obviously, like, if we were gonna have a long debate about is this how we want to expend a big chunk of our money, then yeah, it's gonna take some time. I think that because there's general alignment and it's more about the details, that it shouldn't be a long process, but also it doesn't have to be right now, which I think is frankly a timeline that works for both parties. So good questions and good feedback. Other questions? Comments?
I just want to add to that. We would absolutely, you know, that's why we're here at this meeting, is to hear these kinds of questions. We may not be able to answer them tonight, but we would take that one back to the developer,
Sure.
back to Broadway Capital, and have a discussion internally about which of those two scenarios we would prefer. And we can get back to you on that.
Yeah, that would be terrific. Okay. Other questions while we have these guys?
Just one question.
Yeah.
On that point, that would be really helpful if they could provide that in a way that we can read in a bullet point. This presentation's been great, and I think we, at least from what I gather here, we're all in agreement that we'd like to move forward. It's just the mechanics, the process is important. So the extent to which we can have information on, as I mentioned earlier, the material difference between one approach versus the other, just written down like a bullet point or maybe a reference made available to us would be really, really helpful. Thank you.
Deb, I think I saw you had, yep.
I just, if I can just insert one thing, there was a question previously about condo fees and the subsidy from market rate owners back to affordable owners. And, you know, one of the things that wasn't said is that, and I think everybody knows this, but I feel like I should say it, the buyers who are purchasing in this project on the market rate side know full well that what we can determine the condo fees are right now is you know, kind of a working number. And I didn't hear Roy say that, but, you know, and that it is therefore subject to change. So they're already sort of halfway down the road towards understanding, A, that there is a subsidy, and B, that the condo fees may change. So we as developers and as brokers selling the project have, I think, a little bit of flexibility there. Not much. You don't want to do a project and say the condo fees are gonna be this, and then it turns out they end up being a lot more and piss off a lot of buyers, but there is a little bit of leeway there.
Thank you. Deb?
Hi, so as part of the lottery application process, are you requiring that the applicant be pre-approved in advance by a lender?
Yes, we are. That is a requisite, twofold. One, obviously, you want to make sure that it's somebody who can get to the finish line, and not waste, everyone's time. So they have to be someone that does have can get a loan. Second, you don't want to hurt the chances of those who are qualified in the lottery. If you're adding a group of people who are not going to be able to get a loan, you are directly impacting what could be the randomized lottery selections.
Now, I understand. Initially, you had said that you were reviewing them and you came back on a third request for an application. So I was just confused about whether or not they were coming in pre-approved with the actual application. So thank you.
Quick add-on question. One thing I just want to make sure that we're clear on too, when we think about the material difference in the two types of processes. I know that if this was an independent process, separate from what you guys were doing, what the deed restriction looks like would be 100% up to the trust and to the city. If we were to be part of the lottery, and this might be a Tom question, the existing lottery and add 2 units to it, would that just be the same type of deed restriction that's on all the other ones, or is it still something that, like, how is that determined? Putting you on the spot here.
Yeah, so I think you all could determine if you wanted to use the existing deed restriction or if you wanted to implement your own. One thing about the Commonwealth Builder Program is it only has a 15-year restriction, and then there's some like weird things
The
in play
50%,
upon
yeah.
resale. 50% of the proceeds have to go back to the funding agencies, 50% stay with the buyer. And then there's also like the AMI, so some are 70%, some are 80%. You all could determine what like income levels you want to set it at, and then by extension, like what the deed restriction would be. So I think those are things that, you know, if the developer is going to present some options to you all on what you could purchase, what it could cost, we could look into what your options would be for a deed restriction.
Got it. But because this was part of the Commonwealth Builders Lottery, we'd probably have to follow along with the 15-year and the 50%, or do you think it would not be necessary to be the same type of restriction because they're technically a different funding source? Might
Right.
be you don't know.
I mean, I think it depends on the approach you would take too, right? If you took the latter approach, then maybe we're not as beholden to what is in the lottery. But I do think, I don't know what's legal, but I think what's probably right, if everybody's in a lottery with the same set of expectations about what to encounter, and then for just 2 people it's different, might be kind of strange.
Yeah, so I think that that's a factor that we should all take into consideration then. I personally agree with what Tom says, which is that if we go with the approach of adding 2 units to the existing lottery, the deed restrictions should mirror what's on the other ones, which in this instance would be a 15-year deed restriction, so not in perpetuity. So pros and cons to that, right, as we've discussed. And then part of the Commonwealth Builders is that upon resale of the unit, the proceeds, so the profit over the original price, 50% would go back to the trust fund, and 50% is kept by the seller, the original buyer. The seller.
If the 15, I'm sorry, the 18 units, and again, I'd have to check, and this is a great question to ask overall. The deed writer, the city of Revere already had gotten from the developer 7 units. And then the developer applied for the Commonwealth Builders Program and added 11. There could be an argument to say, wait a minute, those deed restrictions that Mass Housing wants, that has CHAPA as the monitoring agent and who gets 50% of the proceeds after year 15, as the monitoring and has that deed writer, there's a question I would, being devil's advocate, should it include all the 7 that was already part of it? And do you want to have your own deed writer? Because why would, say, these extra 2 have CHAPA as the monitoring agent and also the beneficiary of that proceeds 15, 20 years from now, when it could and should be rightfully the Revere Housing Affordable Trust Fund?
So maybe this is something we should add to the list of questions that we. would
That
want
sounds
to
like
answer.
we're opening up a huge can of worms, but.
Well, it's a good can of worms to open.
Yeah,
I
exactly,
don't like
exactly.
opening cans of worms that are not productive, but this is one
No,
that
no.
could be productive, which is that.
Roy asks a very
Yeah.
good question, and I think
Yeah. Mm-hmm.
it needs to be asked, and, because then suddenly it's not 2 units, it's 9.
Yeah, well, and also
Oh.
too, I think from a trust standpoint, if we're directly, to me, we put in a small piece to unlock a larger funding source. And so we shouldn't necessarily be driving the bus on the deed restrictions and what they look like and what resale looks like for the units that already exist, even though we had a piece in it. But if we're
Right.
like 100% responsible for 2 units and it wouldn't unduly complicate the lottery process for the deed restrict, then it's worth us thinking about and considering, because obviously there are, part of our goal as an affordable housing trust is to add to the subsidized housing inventory to help the city accomplish its 40B goals. And with that, there's an argument to be made that we should be looking at, restrictions in perpetuity, for, longer-term, deed restriction.
I
So
just,
we have-
if I can, I want to go back to a question that was asked earlier about mortgages and pre-approval. We, as I think most of you probably assume, have an end loan partner in particular for this project who is, obviously charged with arranging for pre-approvals for buyers in this project. And it is of some importance to say 2 things. One, pre-approval is not necessarily a guarantee of approval.
Right.
But to the extent that we can be as sure as possible about the financeability of buyers in this project, as far as I know, we're insisting that people are pre-approved by our end loan partner. Is that the case, Roy? I just want to, we're not on the affordable side, but certainly on the market rate side. And so that's another question to throw into the mix.
And Tom, I think you had.
On the affordable, we provide a website and a list of lenders that would be able to get them the loan, and they can use whoever. On the market side, we just insist that they get vetted by us before we enter into a purchase and sale contract.
Obviously, because of RESPA, we can't make anybody get a mortgage from a particular lender, but, we also want to try to ensure that the people we're getting into contract with are, at least have gotten a, seal of approval from our lender first, or from some lender that we've stipulated to help, kind of rein in that process.
Understood. So I just wanted to note that, I think there's some complicated kind of like legal and other questions to resolve. We have a lottery consultant that's been working with us. I feel confident between them and our relationship with CHAPA, Mass Housing, and the gentleman that are on the call today that we can resolve some of these issues and bring it back to the board next time you all are ready to make a decision.
That'd be great. So I think what would be so does anyone else have questions or comments on this, particularly while we have these guys with us? So with that, we really appreciate you both joining us. I think this was.
When
super
is your
helpful.
next meeting?
So our next meeting is an agenda item for us to discuss because it's scheduled to be the same night as the mayor's state of the city. So that's April 10th. But that being said, we have the ability to schedule. What's that?
We could meet before to kill 2 birds with 1 stone.
Totally. So not only are we going to have to move our next meeting anyway, but also we've done in the past when there's a need for it, like special meetings that we can call, sooner if we have action that we need to take that's outside of our regularly scheduled time. But other questions, comments? I think it makes sense to look sooner regardless. So with that, if you guys want to hop off, you're welcome to stay, public meeting. I appreciate your time. I hope you enjoy the pasta and sauce and beef balls, and next time we'll have you bring it. I think
I was
what we-
making it for my mother, actually.
Okay, that's, you know what, now you have to make me feel bad. I guess that's a better cause than bringing it to us.
Thank you, guys, very
Thank you.
much.
So I think what would be helpful,
Thank you.
we have a lot of some homework to do, some follow-up to do. I would like to propose a sort of a non-binding motion for the board to do a couple of things in the coming weeks. One is to work with the city staff, to work with Tom, to get some feedback from CHAPA and Mass Housing on the lottery rules and like how it would work if we were to do it separately versus including as part of it, whether the deed restrictions would have to be aligned with the existing ones or if they could be differentiated, and then how the 70% preference works. So I think we got to get clarification on that. And then sort of an agreement, a sense of the group that we would like to authorize, subsidizing 2 additional units, and that there's authorization for the officers, so that would be myself and Claire and Anayo as the vice chair and treasurer, to, once we have answers to these questions and report back, to sort of negotiate something to bring back to the board for a vote as to what cost would be. I'd like to put that up for a motion, that we're in directional alignment to do those things, to get clarification on the lottery rules and deed restrictions, that there's a general sense that we'd like to purchase or to add, to subsidize 2 additional units as part of this project, and that the officers can work with the developer and the brokers here and city staff on sort of negotiating something to bring back and present to the board for a vote.
Second.
All in favor?
Aye.
Any opposed? Terrific. So we can get to work on that. And then I think like when we start to get into brass tacks of it, numbers, well, actually, I think it would be helpful to then just tag right onto this, the discussion of when we're going to have our next meeting, because I think the urgency around this means we'd like to do it sooner. As you all probably have seen as a late agenda item, so Mayor Keefe is having his State of the City address on April 10th, which is the night of our regularly scheduled meeting. So we're going to want to reschedule our next meeting anyway. And with that, I think it might be helpful to look at, would it be possible to do a meeting sooner? We don't need to necessarily decide this now because I know that you all have to look at your calendars and things. But maybe like if we look at 2 weeks out, like maybe the 27th, 28th, sometime in that range, we might want to look at doing a meeting in like 2 weeks or something like that. So I don't know if that's something that people would be open to looking at times for that. We can send around like 2 or 3 options after the meeting, and maybe we can try to have a goal of meeting in 2 weeks to try to move on this. Does that work for folks?
Yeah.
Any objection to that as a goal? Terrific. Okay, so we have some marching orders here, and I think while we're on this topic, and I think we should discuss a little, sort of from a directional standpoint, and I know there's some questions that need to get answered, the sort of unit mix. So they sent around the market rate units that are available. There's studios, there's 1 bedrooms, there's 2 bedrooms, there's the cost of them, and there's sort of the delta between AMI, the deed restricted price, and the market rate price. I don't know if folks have thoughts on, and obviously part of this is going to be a negotiation with them and what they are willing to do and all that, but on sort of what we'd be looking for those 2 units. Do folks would have thoughts on that?
It looks like there's only 1 2-bedroom unit on the affordable list, so I would say that we should go with 2-bedroom units if possible for those 2.
Yeah, I would tend to agree. I think I see that on the market rate for sale list, they have looks like 8 of those that are currently for sale. So that would, it's not like they're running out of them. There may be an openness to look at both of those.
Joe, could you share your chart with the group? I have it too, but it is super blurry on our end.
Yeah,
And some of us are looking at it on the phone, so it's really hard to see.
it's actually it's just pretty blurry in general.
Yeah,
So
it is
I'll get a higher resolution version and send it around.
Fair enough.
But yeah, so the chart indicates, and we'll put it in the notes for the record too, and I'll ask Roy to send me a higher resolution version of it, because this is what what was sent to me.
Very blurry.
I thought I was going blind.
So yeah, so the mix, there's 1 of the 2 bedrooms, there's a number of studios, and I think it looks like there's 6 1-bedrooms, and they're split between the 70 and 80 AMI. That's another decision that we would need to make too, and so I think if we got, frankly, to me, if we got the same bedroom mix, like rather than one versus two, if we got two of the same thing, it makes it pretty easy decision. I would suggest do one at the 70 and one at 80 AMI. That would be my inclination. I don't know if people have other thoughts on that. Just sort of directionally. And then we can kind of do some rough math, which is that if we're paying the delta, right? So if we end up doing it that way, and it's gonna vary, costs, things like that. But the rough gap between the 80% AMI max sale price and the market rate two-bedroom price is like about $200,000 per unit. So we'd be looking at approximately $400,000 in obligation to the trust, essentially. And the math would kind of come out the same way, even if we bought two units and sold them, it would just be a different process, right? Are folks comfortable with that as sort of a total?
So we'd be buying 2 units at $449?
Well, I mean, I can't, it would depend on how it goes and everything. But yeah, so if you look at the list of market rate units, right, so they have the two-bedroom units that are there. They're listed at $539, $549, $559, and then there's a few that are a little bit less, $459, $459, so I think they have fewer square footage.
Yeah.
Like, there's some that have two parking spots and some that have one. But the sort of general delta between some of these and what the max 80% AMI price is like somewhere in that 200 to 250,000 per unit range.
I think as 70% AMI, the mortgage is affordable. I mean,
Yeah.
so I think it's doable.
Okay. Yeah. So I think we have like a general kind of alignment. I think that there's a lot of stuff that we could discuss when it comes to what the deed restriction would look like, but it probably makes sense to wait until we get more guidance before we come up with a lot of policy around something that we don't know what is and is not in the universe of the possible. So I'd suggest we wait and hold off on that. Okay, I think we covered a lot of ground here on this one, so I know we kind of threw a lot at people to digest. Other questions or things that maybe you have on your mind, or things that we want to think about or work on in the next couple of weeks as it relates to this project? Good work, guys. So it's almost 7:30, so we'll work through some of the other items quickly. And then I think for some of the more substantive items, we may want to push them off, but I just want to make sure we at least get to them. So we talked through the housing production plan. I think I would suggest vacant tax title properties update can probably wait to another meeting unless you have a major update, which I don't think we do. Any other major updates from the city staff side? Okay. Habitat repairs program, so very, very quickly, Claire and I met briefly with someone from Habitat last week, and they're in the process of crafting a proposal to send to us on what a sort of small-scale senior citizen home repairs program would look like. Of course, different pieces pull apart, so they had a goal of having that prepared to bring to us for the April meeting, which now might not happen in the regularly scheduled time. I don't know if they'd be ready in 2 weeks, so TBD. We may hold off on that one for now, but the wheels are in motion for it. Any questions on that? Or I think at this point it makes sense to wait till they have a proposal, and then we can, ask questions of the actual proposal. Okay. And then, so I know that we all were assigned kind of to have different pieces of the affordable home ownership projects that were under ours to research and look into. I think that's a hefty topic that's probably more appropriate for another meeting, but if anyone has any major updates or comments or
I will just say
questions,
one
yeah.
quick administrative part of it. So we were able to put up the shared Google Doc where we collectively add the properties that we think would be of interest. There are folks who may not be on a list because unfortunately Google restricts it to Google Gmail accounts. So if you're not on the list, and I have those who aren't, if you want to join the list, please give me your Gmail account so I can add you. Thus far, Matthew and Lori have already put together some really interesting finds. And it would help us in terms of deciding what other properties would be attractive for us to consider.
And just to have information, right, to get a pulse of what different costs are as we think about options. Other major report backs from that process?
I think the one thing
worth noting, like I've had a Redfin alert set up for any condo, townhome apartment getting listed under $500,000, and there's really not much. Like, there's one on the market that fits that criteria outside of Salem Street right now, and it's one of the older Ocean Ave buildings. It's got a very expensive HOA, which obviously impacts affordability, and it's not necessarily rent-ready. So just wanted to share that color, because I do think if we're thinking about just buying market-rate condos like this, the Salem Street project and allocating more funds there is definitely really compelling compared to what else is on the market. But that's it. I think
That's a
all I
helpful
got to add.
update, I think. Nothing that we don't know, but I think it's eye-opening to do that Redfin alert and to do that looking and to see kind of what folks are dealing with, particularly if you're looking at that end of the market. Others on that piece? Okay, so the other late items, we already talked about setting our next meeting schedule and changing that, so I'll send out updates on that. We talked about the Salem Street piece, and then Claire, just quickly note.
But it's something worth noting and researching and keeping in the back of your head, because it looks like they're doing really cool stuff over there.
Yeah, and I do know that that's something that TND is kicking the tires on. I don't know if it's something that is anything more than kicking the tires at this point, but I know that the Community Land Trust is a goal that, a lot of folks have had. I don't know if you know anything about it beyond that the tires are being kicked. Is that appropriate? I see that Laura is on the call, by the way, so I don't know if you have anything to add to that. If not. So no, I think that's terrific. I appreciate it. I definitely encourage people to check that out. I think that's a good example.
Joe.
Oh, go ahead.
I had trouble finding my mute button.
No worries.
Hi, everyone. I kind of joined spontaneously because I was able to.
Appreciate it.
I have been in conversation with some folks in the community also who are interested in the Community Land Trust idea. There may be a resource for getting an intern type person, or actually a person who's got a degree in urban development, community development, that we might be able to get through one of the other programs. I'm not sure how much I should say about it yet, because we're just starting to really cook the idea. But I think there's support for that. And I appreciate all you guys are doing.
Thank you, Laura. Appreciate what you're doing as well, and all the advocacy and housing production plan and the many other hats that you're wearing on this front, so we appreciate it. Yeah, so Community Land Trust is a great thing for us to think about when we think about aspirational goals, the TND piece, also if there's potential funding that comes through like a state bond bill, which I know Laura, mentioned as something that there's a lot of advocacy around. That's such an exciting possibility. You look at what they did in East Boston with the Blue Line portfolio, and that's something that I've kind of talked to Senator Edwards' team about, where they were able to purchase over 100 units of sort of naturally occurring affordable housing and put on restrictions and keep those affordable to a range of AMIs. These are things that, we would need a lot more. We need a lot more resources than we currently have to be able to do, but it's good to think about as aspirational goals when we think about, accomplishing what we're trying to do. Any other late items to add or questions on any of the above? All right, so with that, then I'll make a motion to adjourn.
Second.
Any opposed? All right, good meeting. All right, thank you.